We are back for another episode of Beyond the Code. Today I'm joined by Tom Teman, who's a product manager for ERC 4337 and head of the account abstraction unit at the Ethereum Foundation. It's going to get a little bit technical, but it's a really, really interesting episode. I highly encourage anybody who's interested in building on Ethereum or understanding what product features might be rolled out in the near future for the Ethereum ecosystem to listen into this episode. I think you'll find it really engaging. Tom and I also discuss some of the ins and outs and politics that are going on at the Ethereum Foundation and what it's like working there generally. So listen in and enjoy. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzy Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Tom Teman, welcome to the podcast. This is very exciting to have you here. I'm looking forward to hearing all about what's going on in the Ethereum Foundation. I'm sure you don't get your hands dirty with all the politics, but there's definitely been a lot of action going on X over the past week. So we won't start with that, but if there's time for it after, it's always good to get into the gossip of the crypto world. So thank you for joining me. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background and about what you're working on at the foundation?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me, Yitzy. It's great to reconnect. Not a lot of people know that we actually know each other from way back, and maybe I'll touch on that when I give my background. So I come from a technical background. I studied computer science in Tel Aviv University. I worked in a startup for about 7 years, which was acquired by BlackBerry. They still exist.
Wow.
They existed back then at least, yeah. And so I worked there for 7 years, and I got into crypto while I was there pretty early on, around 2013, 2014. I remember reading Vitalik's white paper and just being like, as a programmer, for me, the fact that we can automate everything and, replace middlemen with middleware and remove, corruption, mistakes, efficiencies, all those things that, as a programmer really grind your gears. I was really excited about that. And fast forward to 2017. So I'm a team lead there.
Did you dabble in Ethereum on the dev side, or
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
just purely speculative at that point?
So, both. So both speculative, but also I dabbled in it as a programmer. Obviously, that's kind of what drew me into it. And so fast forward to 2017, and Facebook is doing a hackathon in Tel Aviv. And I told my teammate and someone from my team that let's build a dApp. Now, keep in mind, this is around like August 2017. Most people don't even know what Bitcoin is yet. Not really, not like today where, you have presidents talking about that. And it's like, it is mainstream. That is not a question right now. Fast forward 2017, and we do the hackathon, and I told my teammate, let's build a dApp. We used to organize meetups at our workplace, and we had a problem of people like clicking attend but not showing up. So we said, you know what, let's build a dApp with a smart contract that people who want to attend have to deposit like $20 or something to show they're serious into a smart contract. If they show up, they get it back. If they don't, it goes to a charity defined in advance in the contract. I think a couple of dApps came out later that did similar stuff, but this was, back when MetaMask was the only option. So we won first place in the hackathon. They flew us out to the global hackathon in Palo Alto. We had fun. Everything was great. But the problem is that nobody could use it. We saw that problem. We're like, okay, as developers, we want to solve this in a way which is kind of like Stripe. We want to give developers an SDK that they integrate so users have a great experience. So we built Portis. Which was back then, it was the first web SDK, that's for sure, but it was also one of the first Web3 providers, besides MetaMask, which was out there. You had Trust Wallet, had like a beta thing where you had like a dApp browser inside the phone. I always thought that was not the way to go, and it turned out not to be the way to go because it felt like nice internet where you had let me use my phone. Where you had like web portals that you had to go through to get to other websites, and it just felt clunky, and people need an experience which is just as good as what they're used to, hopefully better, right? Otherwise, what's the point? And so we built Portis. We raised capital from an Israeli hedge fund, F2. And we grew the team. Back in 2018, 2019, Portis was like the default Web3 provider where you had MetaMask Portis, a couple of others. We were on Uniswap, OpenSea, all the big ones back in the day had Portis. This was like the way to go. The way Portis worked is that we were very big on self-custodial, on making sure that users hold their own private keys. We didn't want to hold anyone private keys, both from like ideological standpoint, but also from a security standpoint. If we were holding everybody's keys, that puts a huge target on our backs. To get hacked, to get attacked, to get,
Sure.
the government regulation wise. So we were more of a technological company, less of a crypto company, which also helped in Israel when talking to banks and setting up accounts because, even though it was early days, they hear crypto and they're like,
They're thinking
really,
financial services.
yeah, exactly. And we didn't want to go there. So yeah, so the idea was that you encrypt the keys end-to-end encryption. So it's encrypted locally. We store the encrypted blob. We can't decrypt it. We send it back to you, decrypt it on your device, sign a transaction, etc. So you had that cloud experience where it works on your phone, on your browser, and it's all the same, same key, same identity. So you have that familiar experience, but it is end-to-end encrypted, which did mean that if someone lost their seed phrase and forgot their password, we couldn't really help them out. But that's, with great power comes great responsibility kind of situation.
That's the flip side of like decentralization. Like you don't want oversight by like some big overlord. Then you have to understand that like when shit hits the fan, there's no oversight. There's no customer service. Oh, there's almost no customer service. Zengo is like the rare exception, but there's generally no customer service.
Yeah. If you want to, and even in the case of Zengo, and I love the Zengo team and what they're building, when it comes to MPC, it's not completely self-custodial. And that dives a little bit into how the encryption works there, but there is something to be said about how MPC works. But this will touch on account abstraction, which we'll get to later on, which is what I'm doing today. I won't dive into the whole details of what happened with Portis exactly. I'll kind of get to the point where in 2020, right when COVID started, ShapeShift acquired us. We stayed with ShapeShift for a couple of years. Amazing company. Eric Voorhees just yesterday launched his Venice AI token. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah.
It's pretty
You
cool.
can't miss it on crypto Twitter.
Yeah, it's pretty big right now. He's an amazing person. I'm really proud to say that Portis was acquired by ShapeShift. It was that classic case where they were using Portis on their platform.
And they're like, why don't we just buy these guys?
Yeah, because they wanted to release their own wallet, which they did. So a lot of what we did in terms of the end-to-end encryption stuff, they kind of like stripped it down, use it in their own wallet. They did have a big plan on how they wanted to use Portis because Portis was like their go-to market. Imagine it's that classic, like, they're the exchange. We're linked into all the dApps. So we're become like this distribution channel to get the users into their exchange. As I mentioned back then, Portis was a big thing. And however, when ShapeShift decided that they're gonna become decentralized and be a DAO, and it was a big thing back then because it was a big company with a huge treasury that is deciding to become decentralized. Not a company starting out decentralized, but becoming decentralized. It created some waves, and Portis didn't really fit into that roadmap now because once they're decentralized, the whole way that Portis works doesn't really. I did have some vision on how we could decentralize Portis, but it was very ambitious. Let's put it this way.
Because of the open source elements of the technology, or
because of the fact that when you're holding everybody's encrypted private keys, there's still an element of centralization there.
Right.
I was thinking on how maybe that could be sharded and made to be decentralized. And there were a couple of projects out there in the space that I'm not sure if they exist anymore, like Taurus, to try to do something like that. It wasn't truly decentralized. It was semi-decentralized. It's really hard to build things that are truly decentralized and still also be financially feasible as well. There's a lot of questions around that. That was always the problem for wallets. Like, where's the business model? And that was a big thing for us back then as well. That was a big problem. We had, like, it was always, once the entire world uses wallets, then yes, we can probably, even if we take a cent off every transaction, it will make sense in the long run. But at the current state of crypto, it was like, we might make like $10,000, $20,000 a month. That doesn't
not
really,
sustainable, right?
Yeah, it's not really great for investors when you make a pitch deck. Yes, if there's billions of users, this works. And also that means we're the market leaders as well, which is also hard. So I had some ideas on how we can decentralize Portis, but that never came to be. And again, I'm very happy to say that ShapeShift acquired us. It was an amazing company, great culture. And I was also kind of lucky, side note, that they acquired us right when COVID hit. So that was a blessing in disguise in the sense that, they're all based in Colorado. And if there wasn't any COVID, then I would be that annoying guy from Israel constantly being like, hey guys, can you do this on Slack, please? Can we do this on a virtual meeting? Everybody's at home. It's a level playing field. We're all in the same boat. Yes, I got time zone differences, but I can deal with that. So it was kind of cool to happen like that. I stayed there for a couple of years, for about 2 years. And then once they decided to completely decentralize, they basically, this Portis was sold off as just the, like,
The
acqui-hire.
components, yeah.
Yeah, the component, the IP, the components, and the team, which was at this point, I'm the only one, the original Portito kind of person left. The rest are people from ShapeShift working on the product. We moved on actually to Kraken. Kraken released their own wallet. They do the whole Ink network and everything. They had a plan. This was like, I'm
Wait, so they
talking
acqui-hired the Portis components from
ShapeShift.
ShapeShift.
Yes. And
Cool.
this
Okay.
was back in around April 23, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. But then came the end of 23. And no, 22, sorry, April 22. And then came the end of the year of April 22, where all tech companies were firing people, including Kraken, that fired around 1,000 people. They hired 1,000 people that year, and they fired around that same amount. It created a big culture problem for them. I'm not leaking any inside information here because there was actually an article in the New York Times about it, where Jesse, the CEO, talked about it, which makes sense. They were onboarding 50 people every week, and it wasn't like they're hiring people individually. They were buying up teams. And when you buy teams, you might like the founders, but you don't know who else you're getting
Yeah, and you
that
have like
lot.
all these cultural integrations that work or don't work, but they require a lot of time and attention either way.
And I think I'll actually in the current what's the word
Climate.
overtone window that we have currently, that I think the overtone window for using the term overtone window has moved as well, because you hear that so much right now. So the whole idea, there was a big problem around wokeness there. I think like talking about this a year ago, what might have been like, you can't say that, but now I feel like it's okay to say that. And the whole thing that blew up there was that someone on Slack made like a joke in bad taste. And also, by the way, he's from Turkey. He has a different culture. Why don't you accept that, right? If you're so woke. And people were up in arms about it, and he apologized, but he didn't apologize fast enough or well enough in their eyes. And the pitchforks came out, and at some
Wow.
point they said, like, guys, this is our culture. This is a fully remote company from day one. And when you're fully remote, if you don't allow any kind of like, the problem with communication on the internet, where it's like sometimes not in great taste, is that it's there
Misinterpreted
forever, right?
also.
Everybody can judge it. Everybody can see it. It's not like an offhand comment in the kitchen where maybe you'll be like rolling your eyes and you forget about the next day. As long as it doesn't happen all the time and it's not that pervasive, humor sometimes requires you to push the envelope. Sometimes it's a hit and miss kind of thing, right? But if you don't have
Sure.
any space where people can do that, because Zoom talks are usually very to the point, because we both have our time. This is not a corridor conversation. We have 30 minutes. We need to get some agenda going, and we have to move on. So if you don't give any space to do that, it's really bad for culture. And this happened like in a meme channel, like not like in an announcement, general official Slack channel. So they were kind of upset about it. And the people with the pitchforks were even annoyed that the handling of the thing wasn't good enough. That's when they kind of started realizing they have an issue. And that's, when they decided to lay off. Most of the people they laid off were people that joined in the last year. That
And they
included
laid
us.
off people because they were not
No, no,
woke
no.
enough.
No. They were too woke. No.
Oh,
Kraken
okay.
is
The
they were
anti
like
woke. Okay.
they had like a mentality. They're like pirates. They're like crypto. We're anarchists. We're changing. And suddenly they had a lot of people who wanted to do things like the DI, Google, Amazon, Facebook thing, where you have to have committees about what you can say and what you can't. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm not. I
I'm
can
from
go on
I'm from
about
the
this.
other campus, so you don't
Yeah.
have to worry. I
Same.
was also I mean I'm very very pleased with the election results because I felt that as an American I felt that America was going in the complete wrong direction, and that if we don't like nip it in the bud as soon as possible, like America has only been in power for like 200 years. Like if you look like historically at different empires, like they all rise and fall at some point, and I saw this being as like America's demise, whereas kind of just like self-destruction within kind of misprioritizes things. So I'm very grateful that there's like an opportunity now to correct track. I'm happy to see that it happened within Kraken, and hopefully we'll see it in other places as well, starting from the U.S. government.
Yeah. So as for what happened in the U.S. elections, I feel like this is, how in the movie sometimes they travel back in time to a specific moment that was like I feel like that
A
was when the
pivoting.
bullet, when he moved his head. I feel like that was like you have those memes like Civil War and and
I
Doge
mean,
being,
the Trump meme is literally like fight, fight, fight. Like that was that was the moment.
yeah. And I feel like America was kind of saved by what happened. I mean, it felt like it was just like, yeah, let's not go there. I mean, I can go on. I'm not timid to talk
We,
about it,
we
but I
already
don't think
went
that's the
there, but
topic. Yeah, this is not like a political podcast. So yeah, so Kraken let me go. This was like done, by the way, in the most kind of like cliche
Wait, you were one of the
firing.
woke guys?
No. I was not, but my team was, by
Oh,
the way.
you're
The people who joined from ShapeShift from Colorado, they were kind of the first to hold the pitchfork, by the way.
oh,
That
okay.
was kind of like, and
So
which
how did you
was,
feel being part of that team?
I like them personally as people, but it did create me a situation where I felt like, I don't see this long term. It'll be hard for
Okay.
me to work with people where I feel like, especially, I don't even want to imagine what would have happened after October 7th if I was working with those people. I
Wow.
have no idea how I would like. I would feel like they would be those kind of people where they. Oh, but look at both sides, right? Kind of
Right.
like a situation
Where
where
they like
it's.
say something, but like with like in a backhanded comment kind of way.
Yeah, exactly. But you deserve it, right? Or something like that in a
Wow.
backhanded way.
Wow.
Like
Wow. That's brutal.
yeah, I
Um,
don't know. I don't know if that would have happened. I'm speculating here. I don't want to
yeah,
judge
yeah, for
them
sure.
harshly if
Putting the
that.
culture aside, did you like what you were working on at Kraken?
Not really, to be honest.
Okay.
Like I felt I was kind of floating there. It was a bit of a rest and vest kind of situation.
Okay.
And they did me a huge favor because when they let me go, suddenly this opportunity opened up for me to join the Ethereum Foundation to work on account abstraction. Should I give a little bit of explanation what account
Yeah,
abstraction is,
please.
maybe?
Give a little bit background on account abstraction, and I guess like you could segue from there into ERC 4337 because like also not all of our listeners are as familiar as you probably will be, and I familiarize with myself, ahead of us chatting. But I actually asked ChatGPT to explain it to me like I'm a 5 year old, and he did a fantastic job. But I would appreciate if you could explain it to some of the audience members as maybe a 15-year-old.
Yeah, for sure. So this actually, I was very, very excited to join the team. And I remember telling Yoav, who's kind of leading the team. And I say kind of because there's not a lot of hierarchy in the Ethereum Foundation, not a lot of titles either. Like I would say I'm a product manager there, but it's not a classic product manager situation.
Okay.
Okay. It's more of doing like DevRel and product and marketing and a whole host of other stuff. I like to say that I'm doing the same things I used to do as CEO, but just without the fundraising, which is so much better, But it's not exactly like a CEO. I don't set the strategy for everything. It's everything is team based, and it's so the team itself that is working on. Maybe I should start earlier. So about account abstraction. So the challenge I had with Portis when you talked about this earlier was about this whole self custody thing. There's no customer support, as you said, because it's very binary. Currently, if you have an Ethereum wallet, well, not currently, but most likely, okay, because right now there are account abstraction wallets out there. But let's say if you have MetaMask or Rainbow Wallet or any one of those, then you have something called an EOA, an externally owned account. It's basically your private key and public key pair, which is like as your address, and you have that private key which you never tell anyone, right? Because then it's all over. And your address is derived from your public key, your wallet address, and that's also your account. You can think about it as it's similar to account abstraction in the sense that it's a very trivial and basic account abstraction, which means you only have one signature, you don't have a recovery method, and your key can basically do everything, which is very, very scary. Okay, because
But without your key, it's not really your account because like everybody has your public key,
yeah.
and without your private key, it's not your account. It's just a window into your account, as far as I see it.
You mean with like with
I'm
something
si-
like
I'm
a
I'm saying your public key without your private key is nothing. It's informative, and that's it.
your public key without a private key means that account no longer can be used in a sense. Like the public key, it's just the way the
I'm
cryptography
saying I have your
works.
public key,
Yes,
so
but
I don't have
yes.
access to your account. I just have viewer access.
Well, yes, but also keep in mind that without my like the public key is used to verify that my signature was signed with my private key. That's how the encryption works. So when I send a transaction, okay, if you have my public key, you can verify that it was signed with the private key without knowing what the private key is. So it's
Viewer
it's kind of
access.
a proof in a way also that this
Okay.
is linked to that private key. But
Okay.
um, but the idea behind how private key works right now in terms of what it can do is it's kind of scary because it's one key to rule them all, and if you lose it, everything is gone. And the equivalent in the classic traditional finance world would be as if I told you that think about your bank or Facebook or whatever, but let's go with a bank because that's more relevant. Right now, when you log into your bank, the equivalent of the blockchain, and it's not the exact equivalent, but the equivalent of the severity of changing anything on the blockchain is that your bank touches their own database. But you don't write directly to the bank's database. They give you some sort of like,
Promissory
session
note.
key. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's something like that. Yeah. And they say, okay, as long as you show this note, we will write to the database whatever you tell us, but we will verify that it makes sense and it's all okay.
Hmm.
Imagine telling everybody in the world, no, 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 you're all writing directly to the bank's database yourself. And if you make any mistake, that's on you. That's basically what blockchain is right now. That's
When you
why
say it like
it's
that, it
so.
sounds so ridiculous, but like this is the
It
kind of
is.
stuff that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
It is. And if you look at the history of account abstraction, Vitalik says this constantly, he wanted to have something like account abstraction from day one, but anyone who built code knows that you have that pressure from people to release code, right? So when they got their first version and, after the ICO and everything, the ecosystem really wanted to get Ethereum out there. So they were like, okay, we'll do it later. And the problem was that it was always hard to integrate it kind of backwards compatible because it was either not enough or it required too much of a big change. And the problem also, I would say, with integrating account abstraction always was that as opposed to something like EAP 1559, which made gas prices a lot more stable, or others, changes which were about security or performance, it's a lot easier to kind of have a discussion around it and do some simulations and say, hey, here, look, now it works better. Account abstraction is a little bit like art because it's around user experience, which is not necessarily clear and cut what's the right approach, right? And you still have discussions around that. So the beauty of ERC 4337 was that it's an ERC, not an EAP. And let me explain that really quickly. EAP is what you call a hard fork. At some point, it's implemented into the network, and after everybody agrees on it, it's either you use this or you have your own like Ethereum Classic. You don't want to use that EAP? Fine, you can, but branch off into your own network and good luck
Right.
to you.
And the assumption is that everybody makes the determination to move on to the new fork and that
Yeah.
nobody stays in the,
Some people can stay. You have Ethereum Classic. That was an EAP back
right.
then.
But if everybody would have stayed in Ethereum Classic and nobody would have migrated to the new chain, then the new chain
That
would have
becomes
had
Ethereum.
zero significance. So like
Yeah, exactly.
in the end, it's like a majority rules kind of thing.
Yeah, there's like this social element here. This is why when people say like, oh, Vitalik says what he wants and the chain does it. No, look, Vitalik has a lot of clout. People respect him. And if you
Right.
ever talked to him or read what he wrote, you would understand why people respect him. It's a very meritocracy-based ecosystem. So he's a very smart guy in a lot of ways, not just around math, but also around like game theory and economics and social concepts. It's amazing. I remember reading his stuff back when he was like 19 and I was like, I think like 30. And I was like, what the hell? Okay. Like it's really, really a lot to take in. So when he suggested to do the fork, and by the way, back then I was already in the ecosystem in 2016 when the DAO hack happened, I was also in favor of the fork. And people listen to him, but you don't have to listen. You can do whatever you want, but there is a consensus and a social layer here, which is just like in real life. So
But
he
that's the
doesn't like
beauty of
he said.
blockchain also. I mean,
What's
that's
that?
like that's the real beauty of blockchain where you have
Exactly.
like the consensus mechanism that and how they play out in real time and how like they're
Exactly.
honored or not honored on a consensus basis.
It's a little bit like evolution, right? It's kind of like the thing that survived because it survived, because it's good. It's like kind of like an axiom. It just works. It makes sense. So that's an EAP. You either with us or you're against us kind of situation. An ERC is not that. An ERC is like ERC 20. It's a standard that we all agree that if we agree on a standard and we all adhere to it,
Hmm?
then it becomes something that's useful. Standards are useful. If ERC20 didn't exist, you wouldn't have Uniswap and all the other dexes around there because everybody would be using their own standard on what a token is, and you don't have this great interoperability and this, rolling snowball effect of things building on top of each other. So an ERC is something that you don't have to use it. If you want to create your own DEX today with a different standard token standard, and there are different token standards out there, you can, and you won't be split up from the network. You might not get as much adoption, okay, but that's on you. Maybe you'll build an ERC, which is, there's what's it called? ERC
1155?
What's that?
1155?
There's a couple out there. Yes, there's a couple of ERC out there which try to like maybe improve on that, and some of them are gaining traction, some
There's like
don't.
also like R634 or something like where you could like reverse transactions in certain circumstances.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but there's a whole host of ERCs out there. By the way, a little tidbit for people who are developers out there: the number of the ERC is basically derived from the pull request, which is accepted into the GitHub repo of all the ERCs. So that's where the number comes from. It's just like
not
the
like,
pull
I like
request
that one.
number. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a very developer thing kind of
Okay.
situation. So people sometimes wait for a couple of pull requests to come along until they get the number that they want and then submit that
Like
pull request for them.
vanity ERCs, basically.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, 4337 in hindsight was not a great number because it's a mouthful to say sometimes, especially in Hebrew.
Oh,
Especially
whatever.
Alba Shalosh Shalosh Sheva in Hebrew, it's like it's like kind of hard. Yeah, it's a tongue twister. And so the genius of ERC 4337 was that it's an ERC. So what it did like a bottom up approach where instead of coming from the core dev saying this is how you do UX, we're like, no, we have an idea on how this can be done, but we still want to keep it decentralized. And the way ERC 4337 works is that currently when you create a transaction, you submit it to the mempool where all the different nodes, block builders look at the transaction waiting to be included. They pick the ones that have the most gas or the ones that they want to add to the next block. They make a valid block and they submit it on chain. And this is how the blockchain, the chain of blocks, gets built, right? People always say, like, what's a blockchain? Well, it's a chain of blocks. It's kind of like self-explanatory from the name. But so this is how it works currently. And the way ERC 457 works is that, and this is in the title of the ERC, is that it uses an alternative mempool. So now you have something called user operations, which are just like transactions that you know, but with additional data wrapped around them, which allow you to have that additional functionality. And those meta transactions, if you want to call them, or user operation, that's the correct term, the user operations are submitted into a different mempool, which, by the way, we launched officially. We were talking about launching it for a long time. Up until now, it was kind of like centralized in the sense that you would send it to a specific relayer. Now you send it to a mempool where other relayers pick up on that. And there's a lot of benefits behind using the actual mempool, mostly around censorship resistance, which is what you care about in decentralization. So, and also robustness and a lot of other stuff. So you send it over there. There's this new entity called a bundler, which is just like a block builder in a sense. They pick up a lot of user operations, they build a valid block, and they submit this block. They make it into an old transaction. It still all runs on the old infrastructure. You're just basically taking a lot of user operations, making them into a huge old style transaction, kind of do that, transition into this, like to be like something that the old network understands, and you put it on chain. Now, what they do is they do a part which currently doesn't exist, which is validation. So there is a validation right now with EOAs, which is what you use, the regular wallet you use for transactions. With EOAs, the validation is super simple. It's just you make sure that the private key and public key match, and then you can do anything you want. As long as you have enough balance in your wallet to do whatever you're doing, that's the only validation. But we want more than that, right? We want to have different keys for the same account. We want to have keys with spend limits. We want to have multi-sig. We want to have, I only can interact with specific contracts for specific keys, whatever. You want to have all those validation laws on chain enforced, not enforced on some server, which is sometimes the case where you're talking about MPC, not enforced on some centralized server that says, I'll do it for you. You want it to be enforced on chain the same way that, to make sure that it's like, it always works. Nobody can kind of, pull one over me as long as I have, custody over my keys. But now I can have multiple keys with multiple permissions, different recovery methods. I don't have to use just a regular ECSDA, elliptic curve key, which is what EOA uses. I can use something like my biometrics. I can have a key that is my fingerprint or Face ID, and that is enforced on chain, that key signature. That's very critical. So what account abstraction does, what it abstracts, are 4 things. Okay?
Okay.
And let me know if I should stop up until now or something.
No, you're doing great. Let's drill down now.
Yeah. So it's abstracting 4 things. The auth. When I say auth, I use auth as shorthand.
Authorization.
And authentication. It's
okay.
Both of them. So authentication is this key valid? Okay, you check if the key is valid. You check the signature with cryptographic methods. I have the public key. I verify that this works. That this is a right signature. That's the authentication. Authorization is, okay, what can this key do? Can it move 1,000 ETH or can it move only 2 ETH? Can it talk with this contract, with that contract? Can it be used to create another key, which is a form of recovery, right? I want to add another key to this device. So my recovery key is just another key that can create other keys. That recovery key logic can be, I don't know, a key that my lawyer has along with someone else, along with my bank, along with my mom, and only 2 out of 3 together can generate a new one, and it has a time lock, and I can do all of it on chain. That's the beauty of it. Okay,
but those are all individual smart contracts that enable that.
It's all in your smart contract, which is your account. Your wallet is now a smart contract. It's not just this key pair which is a primitive on the Ethereum chain, it becomes, you deploy a smart contract which has all the logic
So
of
it's basically
your
like adding new features or layers to your wallet to enable it to dictate its own smart contracts.
Exactly.
Okay.
Your wallet is a smart contract.
So that's almost like one step away from being an AI agent. I'm sorry to use like the current buzzword, but just like it seems that like from a features perspective, it's resemblant of an AI agent in the sense that it could, dictate certain transactions or whatever based on smart contracts that are within the wallet itself.
There's an interesting overlap there. I would
Okay.
agree in the sense that it becomes you think this is your, I would say, your identity AI agent. Okay. There's not AI there. It's AI in the sense that maybe that's how people talk about AI. In the early 2000s.
There might not be AI in the AI either.
Yeah. It's not AI in the sense that there's neural networks running there.
Right.
It's just if statements, but it is, I would say,
like self-learning or okay.
Oh no, there's no self-learning here. It's a very if then else kind of situation.
Okay.
But it's all autonomous. Like even if you want to, if you don't have the right keys, this account will not let you use it, even if it's you, so to speak.
Got it.
But there are other situations where you can get around that with like different, very creative solutions that I see out there in the ecosystem. I'll mention a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like very interesting ways account abstraction is being used right now. So that's the first thing that's off. The second thing is gas. I'm talking about the first two big things. Those are the things that people are really excited about. So gas is, you heard about paymasters maybe. It's the whole idea that you don't have to pay your own gas. You can either pay for it with whatever token you want, and diving a little bit into chain abstraction, which is the new hot thing right now, you can even pay for it with tokens on one network to have a transaction work on another network. So you have tokens on base.
That sounds like a godsend, because like
this is a godsend. And early on in the account abstraction days, like I'm talking about a year or two ago, people would add account abstraction. They would still have their users use MetaMask or whatever. They still use like the old EOAs, and it's very hard, but they would deploy that contract to get the paymasters because they want to get rid of the gas fees. This was a huge issue. By the way, if I go a little bit backwards to Portis and the team I'm working with right now, by the way, they're all Israelis. Everybody working on account abstraction of 437, everybody is Israeli. It's kind of an interesting point.
Israelis in Israel or Israelis?
Most of them.
At large. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Is this a team that you hired and manage?
No. This is a team that built this before I joined, after I left Kraken. Got left. And so I actually know them from beforehand because they created the gas station network project, which aimed to solve the problem of gas sponsorship in a decentralized way. They build an ecosystem that allows specifically that. And I knew them. Well, I knew Yoav because we have a mutual friend, and back in 2018, he was like, oh, you're in blockchain, you guys kind of should talk, right? And Portis integrated the gas station network. We were the first wallet to integrate them because we also tried to solve this. Early on in the days of Portis, we gave each new user, before we entered the gas station network, I
remember this. You gave them $1, right?
$1 for free of Ethereum, which currently I think is worth around like maybe $20, because this was back when it was like $200-$300 per ETH. So maybe it's like $10, $20, whatever. We did like SMS verification because we didn't want to get, otherwise people would just kind of hose us. And we first started, by the way, by blacklisting some countries. Then we had to start whitelisting the countries that this was okay with. And then once people from the UK found a way to get around, use some external APIs that verify that a phone number is like real, so to speak, with their metrics, their way of doing that. And even once in the UK, someone managed to get around that, we were like, okay, we're shutting this down. We can't do this anymore. We had those too many white nights, sleepless nights, so to speak, that we had to kind of like we saw suddenly that people were draining our wallet, and we had to kind of look at that. But this was a big problem from day one, because we were like, if we give people $1 of ETH, which back then was enough for like 3-4 transactions, we can kind of, and they don't need to install anything, and this is all in their browser with the SDK and everything. We wanted to demonstrate that the first, 10 minutes can be easy
to
solve for this. But this was not sustainable, not scalable, etc. So the gas station network aimed to solve this. And that same team is the team that is now working on account abstraction. Awesome. And solving the gas issue was a big problem from day one. And what paymasters allow is for users, they don't need to have the native currency. So you can have a wallet with just USDC, like a Venmo kind of wallet, and you're paying for the gas fees with USDC. Someone else, some other entity, which is the paymaster, which can be either just it's a smart contract, but there's two types of paymasters. There's a paymaster where it's purely on-chain, and Circle just a couple of days ago released their completely decentralized on-chain paymaster where anyone who's building a dApp can just tap into. And if they want to allow their users to just pay gas fees with USDC, they can do that. They don't need to sign up for an API. They don't need to do anything. It's a smart contract. Anybody can use it. So that's super interesting. It's either that or it's something called a verifying paymaster, where it's kind of like what you talked about with the promissory note. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
So where you go and let's say some sort of server off chain, you would do some sort of verification and they give you some sort of like signed message and say, take this signed message, add it to your user operation.
And you could redeem X amount of cash.
And exactly. The paymaster will be like, oh, it's this guy using this for this transaction. Okay, I know it's good. I'll pay the gas
And these
fees.
features are theoretical or they're already available for use?
Already available. Like I said, a couple of days ago, Circle released their completely decentralized paymaster. Off-chain paymaster, which were a lot easier to do up until now, because when you do it completely decentralized, it's a little bit trickier. But if you do it like off-chain, and with that note that I gave you and you add to your user operation, that has been around for more than a year, even more than that. And that was a big selling point of a contraction. This was a big reason why people integrated it. So I said authentication, gas, those are the things we're abstracting. Because right now it's not abstracted. If you want to do any transactions on Ethereum, you got to have native currency ETH in your wallet to begin with. And that's super hard, right? It's like, it's also, there's a privacy issue here. You want to, like, let's say you want to go and claim an airdrop or an NFT that someone sent you. Well, you got to send some ETH into your wallet. Where are you sending it from? Probably from some other wallet, which is already doxed, right? Which is identifiable to you, either your Coinbase account or some other wallet. If I dig deep around, I can see where it came from and figure out, oh, this is Yitzy's wallet, even though it's a new wallet that it used to claim. But with a paymaster, I can just claim and keep it anonymous from the beginning because the paymaster is paying and they'll be like, oh, you get one of the tokens I get from the airdrop.
Amazing.
You pay for the gas. So it solves a lot of things and mostly around usability. That's the big thing here.
So that's number two.
The other two, okay, so I'll touch on the third one, which is less interesting, which is nonce. So nonce, whenever you send a transaction, you have a sequential number. And that prevents replay. That's a replay protection. So I can't it's a security thing.
Yeah.
But right now, the fact that they're just like sequential is limiting and creates a lot of issues. Anybody who's used blockchain long enough knows you have that situation where MetaMask says, oh, something failed, but you can't send another transaction because right now your nonce is kind of in limbo. It's like the network knows that you used up your third nonce, for instance, your 53rd nonce, whatever. And now it won't accept any other transactions because you're sending number 54. So we're abstracting that as well. You can have 2D nonces and stuff like that. It's useful for multisig. It's useful for games. There's a lot of situations where you don't necessarily want to have just like a single thread of transactions you can send. I think it kind of makes sense. And the last one is execute. So how the transaction is executed can also be abstracted. And the big use case for that is batching. And if you heard about 7702, which is coming in Pectra, that and gas abstraction are the big things why people are excited about that, because you can have that for EOAs. It has its limitations. 702 is not going to be full account abstraction. It's a great solution if you have an EOA, which you want to keep using and have the benefits of what account abstraction offers. There is literally almost no reason why a new user would use 7702. They should onboard into a account abstraction, smart contract wallet. The only reason used to be like the deployment cost, but with L2s, that's not really.
So how does somebody onboard into an account abstraction wallet?
They just let's go to Base, for instance. You create a Base wallet right now. It's going to be a smart contract wallet.
The default is that it's going to be a smart contract wallet. Okay.
I think so. I'm not sure I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure that's the default right now.
Very cool.
So those are the four things: auth, gas, nonce, and execute that we abstract.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what it's actually like working in the foundation. Like, what does your day-to-day look like? I imagine that most people work remote. Like, do you guys ever interact with one another? Do you have like Zoom calls with Vitalik? How many employees are in the foundation? Give me a little bit of color.
Okay. So in the foundation, the way it works is that it's big on something called subtraction, which is so the foundation is designed to dissolve one day. That's the idea. It's a nonprofit. Okay. It's a nonprofit that has a pretty big treasury, granted, but that's great because what the foundation does, the whole concept there is that we're trying to kind of keep on watering this garden, okay? Giving grants to project, we're doing work around education and stuff like that because
encouraging innovation on chain and encouraging new developments and expanding the chain and making it more efficient.
Yeah. And also recently helping around coordination. For instance, around chain abstraction, you have a lot of different L2s. And for obvious reasons, they're all trying to maybe push and pull in different directions in how they want things to happen. But there is a value that there's going to be a lot of value if they all coordinate around the same standards, around kind of like the same solutions for the basic infrastructure of like how they communicate between themselves, how things are like bridged between different chains. So the Ethereum is kind of like the foundation has that benefit of being this neutral party that can kind of come in the middle and say, okay, let's help you guys coordinate. Let's help you guys kind of like get to that shared standard, because they all also agree that there is value, but it's a problem doing it for them to do it themselves, because it's kind of like everybody wants to be the one leading the conversation. It's kind of like for obvious reasons. So it helps to be this neutral party. The way the foundation works then, it's that you have most of the foundation in terms of people who are part of the Ethereum Foundation as employed are people that are doing things around research, or I would say it more like business, which is mostly product or things of that nature. It doesn't have a lot of marketing, as you probably hear from Twitter, which I believe also that Ethereum shouldn't have a marketing by itself in the foundation. If there's a great marketing campaign, like company that wants to do anything, the foundation can support it with money or resources or whatever, but it shouldn't be part of the foundation in my eyes. There's a value in keeping the foundation kind of like, I don't know if
pure.
Clean is the word, but
yeah,
kind of like
exactly. That's exactly it.
No, there's nothing dirty about marketing. I'm not trying to make it sound like that.
No, but keeping it removed from the promotion aspect of the chain and focus just on building and bringing value. It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what's the culture like?
It's very varied because there's a lot of different people, and most of the time I don't work with most of the foundation. Like the teams that I work with are my team, which is a handful of people, and teams from the foundation. Here and there I'll work, like for instance, if we do something interesting on Twitter, then I'll talk to the person managing Twitter, ask for a retweet or something like that. But or if there's a conference, then I'll usually work with the team around the that are doing DevCon, for instance. Then I'll work with them. But most of the year we don't really talk. And there's the ESP team, which is around grants. So whenever we do a grant round, or there's someone coming up to us with a grant proposal, then I'll work with the ESP team around that. But most of my day-to-day is actually with teams in the ecosystem. The L2s, the wallets, the bundler teams, all the teams building around account abstraction specifically, those are the teams that most of my communication is with today. So
and it's on like a good faith basis. Like anybody who's building within the ecosystem could draw on the foundation for resources.
Well, they can ask.
I'm saying theoretically, like how do you determine who you work with, and like is there a compensation element, or is it only for people who are receiving grants, so then they're able to get access to the services? Like if somebody's building on Ethereum or building a tool for Ethereum, but they're not getting a grant from the foundation, could they still opt to work with you guys?
Oh, of course. We're not just working with people who get grants. We work with everybody, but sometimes we work with teams that get grants. The idea behind grants, by the way, is that our end goal is to have something which will be a public good for everybody. That doesn't mean that the entire company has to be like completely open source and whatever and decentralized. Sometimes that's even preferred not to be that case, because we don't want to give a grant to some team to build something and 6 months from now, because it's just like two guys in a garage and they're very idealistic, which is great, but then that project becomes unmaintained and it's not getting continued to be, nobody's advancing it and getting it more integrations. But if, let's say, a big company does build something that has a lot of open source elements to it that can be used by others, but it also ties into their bigger roadmap, that means that those things will get maintained. So we're trying to make sure that we can build things that are sustainable. We don't want to have teams constantly relying just on grants from the Ethereum Foundation. There are exceptions to the rules, like for instance, the Geth client or stuff like that. Teams that are building like very core infrastructure parts of Ethereum, where you do need to continue maintaining it by ourselves, because otherwise the business, it's not just that they can't do a business model, is that sometimes it's risky if they have a business model, because then it can affect the neutrality of the building.
Or can have security breaches because it didn't go through enough vetting like the Geth client has.
Yeah, it's like sense. Security issues. It's like people, taking it in ways which are, and we see this a lot in the space where if you're talking about private companies, decentralization is not necessarily always the highest priority. Because, and I get that. I've founded a company in the space. We cared about decentralization, but we also care of creating shareholder value. So right? Well, we need to raise funds. I need to live. I need to sustain the company. right?
I always tell clients, when we start working with, I'd say more potential clients, when we start to ask them, okay, like, what's your philosophy? How are you planning on working? Usually we start with trying to help them determine their, the optimal corporate structure. And then it's a question of like decentralized, not decentralized, governance, not governance. Like, are we going to have a foundation involved? And most of the time they say decentralized because they do believe in the space, and they know that that's how it's supposed to work. But then they start talking about what you said, what you correctly pointed out, like shareholder value and taking home profits. Are like, well, you can't have both, right? You're either here or you're there. And I very much respect those founders that say, okay, we're building for the space, but we don't care about decentralization. Like, we're not going to call something decentralized or pretend that we have governance, but keep all the keys close to our chest. It's a mature step. It's not an easy one to make, but like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're either decentralized, you have governance, you give the keys over to the community, you let them make decisions that might be hard, that might have negative implications on you personally, or you go the other route and you say, okay, this is a for-profit company. My goal is to create shareholder value. And while there may be, tokenization or other aspects here that are going to have decentralized features to them, ultimately what I'm trying to build is a company that's going to make me a shit tons of money. It's hard. It's a hard game to play, but like I said, I appreciate those founders that are mature enough to say it like it is.
I'm saying it's possible to have a completely decentralized project that is profitable. Ethereum, case in point, but it's very, very, very hard, and not every project has to be completely decentralized. That's what I'm saying, is that there's room, and this is what a construction did in a sense. It kind of ties into that with EOAs, it's either all or nothing, right? It's either I hold my keys completely or someone else holds my keys completely. There's no in between. What account abstraction did, it allowed you to have this kind of spectrum. I can create an account abstracted wallet that is just like an EOA, where I have just like one key that does everything and that's it. And if I lose it, it's gone, even though it's a contract. But I can start creating like gradual fallbacks, right? And here's a great example. There's a project called Mina Wallet in Japan that got a grant from us. And what they do is the government issued IDs in Japan. You can sign with them, like with an NFC. You can just put them next to the phone, and there's a private key pair inside that you can sign transactions, basically. So this becomes de facto your hardware wallet. So you can have a situation where you use your phone day to day, you just sign with that transactions up to whatever amount. But if you lose your phone, you can recover your wallet with your hard government ID, or alternatively, just use your government ID to sign for stuff, to sign for, transactions. So if you lose it, your recovery becomes your government. So hardcore crypto people will be like, "What? The government holds my keys?"
That's what I'm thinking.
It's sure, but it's
like,
a choice.
You're not going to sell this to anybody.
I don't remember who said that in the Matrix. I think it was the architect or something like that. The problem, or was it the Oracle? I don't remember. The problem is choice. It's all about the fact that it's not the problem. The great thing here is about choice. Right now, if you use your bank, you cannot really step away from the banking system. But here I can choose, look, I want my account recovery to be my bank. And yes, I'm trusting my bank that they can, in theory, recover my account, recover by myself, which basically means giving access to another key, which they own, and steal my money.
Yeah.
But I can, so I have that granularity where I can have custodial services help me give me out, but I can opt out. I can claw back the permissions whenever I want. So that's the control, that this is what you get. You have this kind of granularity. So the same with decentralization. Not everything has to be either fully decentralized, this is a blockchain, which is the most decentralized thing, or it's there's a completely centralized thing.
I agree. There's definitely a scale.
Yeah. So there's room for both, for everything. That's my point, depending on the use case.
Okay, so it sounds
going back to the Ethereum Foundation, to your question about, so it's very big on subtraction, which means that it's trying to get teams to kind of like leave the nest and be by themselves. This is why you don't have a lot of development teams that are directly employed by the foundation. They still work with the foundation. They get big grants every year. It's like de facto they're part of the foundation. De jure, they're not. They're not employees of the foundation, and in theory the foundation can say after 1 year, look, we don't think this continue giving you this grant makes sense, go on and succeed by yourself. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like you kind of operate within your own little bubble within the foundation. But just like following along on crypto Twitter, there's definitely like a lot of politics. I also told you how I recently read Laura Shin's book, which I recommended. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. Idealism, Greed, lies in the making of the first big cryptocurrency craze, which really just like goes into the nitty gritty of all the politics behind the foundation of Ethereum, and of the Ethereum Foundation. And it's really like it's gripping. You should definitely read it. And also, there's just like been a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not following along as much as I should, but like I saw there was like Vitalik's been tweeting a little bit last week. 1 second, let me see if I could share my screen. I've never done this before. You see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was like very out of character. I've been reading and following him on Twitter for many, many years, and I've never seen him. I thought maybe like some like foundation intern took over his account or something. He wrote, "This is not how the game works. The person deciding the new EF leadership team is me. One of the goals of the ongoing reform is to give the EF a proper board, but until that happens, it's me. If you keep the pressure on, you're making my job harder." Like totally out of character. Like what is that something that you guys talk about like in your internal Slack channels? Like what the heck is going on there?
Internally, I haven't seen too much discussion around that because I think people are more discussing things in inner circles, not in any public channels.
Okay.
I will say that.
Look at this pure evil. It's so much fun to watch.
Yeah. Look, Vitalik also, I think, grew and matured he's been thrown into a very difficult situation, and I think he's been handling it. I don't know a lot of people in the world would be able to handle I agree. Such pressure.
Kudos to
as
Vitalik.
Well as he did. And like I said, there's a lot people listen to him because he speaks, he says things that have, I don't know, that make sense, that are smart. So that's why people listen, not because he's got us in a chokehold or something.
Yeah.
I can't say that I know that much about what's going on because I to be honest, it's not that I'm not interested at all, but I'm not that interested in it to that degree. I know Danny Ryan as well. Danny Ryan has also been told, and he was a big part of the leadership before he left. He decided to take like a sabbatical. He was basically the one in charge of getting the merge happening, which was great, which is EIP 1559, which was made huge progress for Ethereum. And I talked with him a couple of times, while during my time in the foundation. Awesome dude, really is. Is what's right now for the foundation more of like what's the Bronze Age, whatever, or I think that's like, I think the conversation on crypto Twitter, it's kind of like that.
Toxic much?
It's toxic, and there's an SAT saying in Israel. There's like a phrase, the Israel psychometry, the SATs.
Yeah.
We have Aramaic phrase there. I don't know. Did you do the Israeli SATs?
Yeah, of course. I did
okay,
so 3 times.
Okay, so Ishta Balagina, how's it called? Ishka Balagina Kra, something like that. You know that one? Ishta Balagina. Something like it basically means that if you have a big vase with a small like bolt inside, it makes a lot of noise. A little bit, the equivalent is like the squeaky wheel gets the oil kind of thing, but not exactly. It's like, when the sun is setting, small things make big shadows and all those kind of phrases. You have very loud people that are making a lot of noise. I'm not sure if they kind of impact. I'm not sure if they kind of like, the fact that they make a lot of noise means that a big percentage of crypto Twitter agree with them. Yes, the foundation, I don't think it's doing things perfectly. Okay, sometimes it has some difficult situations they're put in. You try to be neutral, but sometimes being too neutral can also work against you. They are sometimes accused of moving too slow. On the other hand, I think the room for moving fast and breaking things are L2s. You don't want to move fast and break things with L1s. With Ethereum mainnet. So there's reason to be cautious and be very mindful of decentralization. People are like, hey, why doesn't Ethereum just stake all their ETH and show they believe in this? Well, what happens if there's like a contentious fork and then Ethereum Foundation is kind of forced to choose a side because they have a financial interest now in choosing which way to go, and that breaks their neutrality. So sometimes people just don't necessarily play out all the scenarios in their head.
Sure.
Thankfully, the foundation has a lot of very brilliant researchers in their ranks, which are guys who just sit all day and think about those things, and they're very capable. So they kind of try to avoid those problems beforehand. And so it's not always so clear cut what's the right thing to do. And everybody's very smart in hindsight, of course. I don't know. I feel like the foundation up until now, and yes, I'm talking from a position, so to speak, but I thought this even before joining the foundation, it has been handling things the past, 10, 11 years very well. Case in point, Ethereum is doing very well.
So that
Yeah.
let me ask you about that. I'm not trying to pump my bags here, and I know how everybody is always like, every action that has a direct impact on the price of Bitcoin, people are like, why isn't ETH moving? Now, I don't expect like any like magic wands to happen, but I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation now, and if anything, like I'm coming off even more bullish about the chain than I was before. Case in point that like there are these entire teams that are set up in like building on the chain and making it more efficient, where there are other L1s that you could look at them and you could see they've basically been stagnant from day one. They came out with a lot of noise and promises that they never failed to never succeeded in delivering on, raise a shit ton of money so that they can keep
Yes.
going through a slow death. And their tokens are performing however they're performing. Ethereum, the price maybe hasn't moved so much, but it sounds like it's just getting better and better, and is just going to keep getting better and better with teams like yours that are just working to improve the protocol. So to me, that's like a very positive signal. And yet the price of Ethereum hasn't been stagnant. It's been like it's been worse than
Yeah,
stagnant.
yeah, I
So
know, I
like
know. If you look, there's
I'm
that
really
meme like
curious.
Bitcoin hit 1,000, 100,000, Ethereum was 4,000. Hit 100,000 again, Ethereum was 3,800, 3,600. Every time it's hitting 100K,
Unclear to me,
the,
like
the, the
what.
ratio to Ethereum and Bitcoin, look, Bitcoin right now is getting all the love, right? It's been talked as a reserve currency. By the way, people are saying, should Ethereum also be a part of reserve currency? I think that as
Well,
long as the
it's not a finite resource, so it's hard to attribute like a reserve element
I,
to it.
I think if the U.S. has, I'm not that familiar with what it currently has as reserves assets, but
Mostly gold.
if it has oil, I would say Ethereum qualifies as well. If it has things that are used to, because when I used to shill Bitcoin and Ethereum to people, from the early days, I used to say Bitcoin is like buying gold, Ethereum is like buying oil. I would also say it's like buying oil, and the Model T just came out. This was back in 2016. Now I would say it's like, because I would say was before the highways are getting built.
An
Now
electric
we're past the
cars.
Model T. I don't know what we have between Model T and Toyota, but it's somewhere like I don't know, what are the car like from the 50s, like
What
something
the
that's,
Fords?
no, there's like those big car, yeah, like a Ford or whatever, like that's Model T, right? I'm thinking like something that came like in the early 50s, back when the car industry was getting very big, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not like it is today, right? It's still not there. It's like we're getting there. We're talking like, we have had just I'm bullish because the headlines I'm seeing, that if we would have seen them back in 2016, 17, people would lose their minds. And now they're like, oh yeah, yeah, of course, like yeah, sure, yeah, that the U.S. president just bought another $100 million of Ethereum. Yes, of course, in a public way, and he's talking about this, and everybody around him is using crypto. And it's like, yeah, of course. It's like,
And the price of
just
Ethereum is still not moving.
look. I can put on my tinfoil hat and give you some ideas. I think look, the reason why I believe Trump will pump crypto is because I also believe he works very well in self-interest. And unless I do have a very, very, I told my wife this theory just so I can tell I told you so if it happens, but I don't think that's a reasonable thing to happen, is that he's actually pulling one on everybody, is that he's actually, making it seems like he's going to be pumping Ethereum, but he's actually going to pass something that tries to kill it, and he's be shorting it behind the scenes or something weird. But, again, I
Wouldn't
don't,
put it past him.
yes, I wouldn't put it past him. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people around him who would not be happy around that. And I feel like it just isn't worth it for him. He has so much more to gain by just, embracing it and moving forward with it, especially since he's not part of that kind of like whole old regime, which is very much tied to the banks in a way. He's also tied to the banks, don't get me wrong. He's also like a businessman, but it's not, I don't see it as in the same way as the current government that just left, which has been horrendous for crypto in a lot of ways, with just
And for innovation
unclarity. And
generally.
yeah, I mean, I can't say anything when it comes to Israel because we're stuck regulatory wise in the 70s. It's terrible
No, but
here.
Israel, I mean, I actually just had the SEC commissioner, Hester Pierce, on a couple weeks ago on the podcast. And one of the things that we discussed was how I said I was disappointed with the SEC's failure to create clear guidelines for crypto, because the Israeli regulators are just kind of sitting on the fence, and other regulators, but Israel in particular generally looks to the US as like the responsible adult and, waits for them to make decisions and then basically just copies them and implements them here at home. And it's no different in crypto. Like the regulators in Israel have been, they've failed to provide guidelines. In some cases, they've done they've regulated by enforcement like the SEC has, but basically they're just waiting for the SEC to say this is how it's done, and then they're going to do the same thing. And so in that sense, I think that we're going to see a change there as well now.
I hope so, because right now in Israel you have this really, like, I get what you're saying, copying regulation, but even now in the US it's so much better. Like, you can get your crypto from your exchange into your bank
as a consumer. Yeah, absolutely.
As a consumer,
I wasn't
I'm not
looking at
even
it
talking about the
from a
companies.
consumer perspective. I was looking at it from a development perspective. But yeah, as a consumer, there's no worse place to be than in Israel. Again, it's not so much a regulatory issue, so much as it's a banking issue.
We have a
But
cartel.
I would say that
we have two banks basically that dictate everything.
But even the reason that the banks haven't been forthcoming with accepting crypto from investors and consumers is because there hasn't been clear regulation in Israel. And banks, in the end of the day, are for-profit businesses. If there are unclear regulations and if they stand to pay large fines, then it's just not worth it for them to take your crypto, whatever it is, even if it's several $1 million. Like, whatever they're going to make off of you is not worth it if what they're facing is like, several $100 million in fines.
No, I agree. It's both sides of the aisle are kind of at fault here. I mean, when you have bigger countries like in Europe or in the US, then you have like the smaller players that are willing to take that risk because they need to find their edge. And then once the big ones, the big players see that, okay, they can actually do it and it works, then they copy them, and it kind of, even if the regulator is not great, because like you said, they're business oriented. If they see that they can do it in a way that is still safe within the boundaries, they'll do it. And in Israel, just because you have two large banks, I won't name them, but we all know who they are, the two biggest ones, and everybody kind of follows it, there's no chance for any small guy to kind of make it there. It's just like we're too small. That's always been the problem with Israel, I think. It's like that we're trying to be like a big democracy. We're the size of Jersey. We don't really have the possibility. Everything's going to be a cartel here. Power, money. Power, I mean, like electricity, money, communications. It's just like, it's really hard to make this non-monopolized here. That's a big challenge.
I will quote a former client of mine who's now on his way to jail, but Alex Mazinski of Celsius was wont to say, unbank yourself. So
I also quoted him, by the way, in this conversation. When I said replacing middlemen with middleware. I love that quote from him.
I think I'm wearing his shirt. I don't know if it says unbank yourself, but...
Yeah, Celsius.
Hodl.
Oh, yeah. He's going to be hodling in jail.
He's going to be hodling on for dear life.
Yeah, hodling the bars.
Yeah.
But
yeah, whatever. Celsius was good for some things. Tom, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate this. If any of our listeners want to follow you, find out more about the stuff that you're building, find out more about the things that the foundation is rolling out, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you and kind of hear about
so
what
I
you're
think
doing?
Twitter is the best way. Like if they want to reach me like an email, then just tom@ethereum.org. That's my email. Okay. If they want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Tom at Tom Teman. They can also follow at ERC4337. That's also
is that your account
for that? Yeah, okay. Which I manage. Like I said, that's part of like what I'm doing. The rest of the team is like most developers. Although we had a recent addition to the team as well. You met her in the conference we met, Melissa. She's also part of the team now. Basically, doing what I'm doing.
Awesome.
Letting the researchers focus on research, and we can do all the rest, which is around coordination with other teams, conferences, grants, hackathons, everything that's not just like writing out the protocol itself, which is very hard. So Twitter, email, like I said.
All right.
And, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Thank you. This has been a lot of fun, and looking forward to seeing more developments coming out of your team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.